Hello guys, welcome to my hybrid Dragonknight PvP build. This is a hybrid Dragonknight build, so yeah, we finally got around to the Dragonknight. We're building the hybrid on it, and I have got one heck of a nice spec for you guys here. It has got really awesome damage, 5.6k fully buffed weapon spell damage, and awesome recovery to go with it, plus battle roar. This is probably the best sustain I've had on a hybrid build yet, while still maintaining that awesome amount of damage that a hybrid can push out this patch. The fun fact about this build, guys, that I went for, I was trying to do the whip. I mean, so many people that play a Dragonknight, that's what they want. They said, oh, I want a Dragonknight that can use whip. I want to use a stamina whip, this and that. Well, now you can just use the fire whip on your dual wield bar, use the fire gap closer on your dual wield bar, and it all works. Let's jump into this hybrid build, guys. Okay, so let's take a look at the stat page to begin with. We've got 19.1k Magicka stamina. On the low end for sure, but this is pretty standard for a hybrid to be sitting around that 20k max stat mark. 19k is lower. It is lower than the 20 to 22ks that we've had before, but we make up for that by having well over 5.6k weapon damage and spell damage on this build. In our max health, we're coming in at just above 20k, so almost 21k here. That's not a ton of health. We are a medium armor build, though, so that is appropriate for PvP, I think. If you want a little bit more health, you can go for more health if you'd like by replacing the regen drink that we run with a max health drink. That being said, I think that 20k is actually okay. You don't really need more health than that. Any more health than this, and you're honestly just giving up potential damage and sustain that you really shouldn't be giving up. So this is actually okay for max HP. Taking a look at our recoveries, we have 1500 Magicka and just about 1700 stamina unbuffed. When we buff up with the potion, we get up to 1700 Magicka and almost 1900 stamina recovery. So great recoveries on this build. And we do have battle roar too, so we are a DK. So we actually have a ton of sustain on this hybrid build, and you want to have fairly high recoveries, I think, and it just plays well with the smaller pools. The smaller your pool is, the more recovery you want in order to be able to maintain usage of that pool. And I think this is a great balance point. Having played a few duels on this build, I can say that the recovery felt fantastic. I never felt like I was going to run out of resources in the one-on-one. Out of all the hybrid builds that I've done yet, I think this one has the best sustain. So there's that. It also has really awesome damage too, so there you go. Let's take a look at the weapon and spell damage. So we're going to buff up real quick, and here you see it, 4,682 weapon and spell damage on this build. That's actually pretty decent. This is not including our bow buff, so we do have the infused bow on the back bar that's going to give us another 600 weapon spell damage, which is going to push us at 5,300 weapon spell damage on this spec. And then finally, we are running a master bow as well on the back bar here, so that's going to give us another 300 weapon damage that does count towards your spell damage as well. So we get 5.6k outgoing weapon and spell damage when we're attacking, and 5.3k weapon and spell damage for effective healing. So we have huge amounts of weapon spell damage on this build, and that's what we want to see from a Pelinals hybrid. I like the set combination on this build. It's how we pushed it so high, and we'll get into that once we check the gears out. Now for the crit and weapon crit spell resist, these are fairly low, and this is not a crit build, so you don't actually even need to run the buffs here if you don't want to. You can neglect them, it's alright. Now if you do want to run the crit buffs, you totally can. This build doesn't natively come by them in the skills that I use, so you could just replace certain abilities or replace weapons or whatever to get the buffs that you're looking for. You can also go for a weapon and spell crit potion if you want. That's going to give you both of the crit buffs as well. But of course, you give up the extra sustain that the tripod gives you. For the physical spell resist on this build, it is also pretty darn good. Medium armor DK does well. Physical resist coming in at 22k. That's very nice. Spell resist. And the physical resist coming in at 18k, which is standard medium armor. Our crit resist is just over 2,100. So we got a good amount of crit resist on this build. You want to run at least 2k crit resist on a medium armor build in PvP. Looking at the Munduses that we have gone with the Warrior Mundus. Very important for a Pelinals build because this will be copied over into spell damage as well, so we're effectively double dipping on this Mundus. We are a stage 2 vampire. Vampirism is optional on this spec. Having play tested it, I only played it as a vampire. That being said, I had no sustain issues at all on this build. So you could drop Vampirism. You don't need it for the 10% sustains. You can get some health recovery then. This build can sport over 1k health recovery buffed if you run the purple drink for the health recovery instead of just the Magicka Stam recovery drink. And that comes into the food that we're running, which is the Stamina Magicka Recovery Drink. So like I had mentioned, this is going to be the best drink all around for your sustain. And the hybrid needs both the Magicka and Stamina big time, so that's going to help out a lot. Now you do have some other food options. If you want to glass this build up a little bit more and give up some regen in favor of more damage, you can do a Candied Jester's Coins. This is going to give you some max stat and some Magicka recovery. So you drop a bit of Stam recovery, which is arguably the one that I think you can afford to give up on the hybrid Pelinals build, and you get max stamina out of it and max Magicka recovery. So if you use this food, you can just push a little bit higher, 21 to 22k max stat on this build, but it's totally up to you if you want to drop the regen. I think the way that I have it now with the regen is pretty ideal. You guys will really like the sustain on this build. Trust me, it's really, really good. The other food options that we have, of course, we could go for just the purple damage food. Now, a DK does have Battle Roar, like I had mentioned, so this is a potential option if you want to go for just a really higher damage version of this spec. But I think overall in PvP, the regen is going to be a little better. And as I had mentioned, this is going to be the 3 recoveries here, your health, Magicka, and Stamina. And this is the drink I think you want to run if you're not a vampire, and that extra health recovery is really going to play into keeping you alive, because health recovery is OP in PvP, guys. Okay, let's take a look at the sets that we're running on this build. I know you guys want to see them, because all the hybrid builds, honestly, they all start with Pelinals. This is something that we all know, because Pelinals is really what unlocks hybrids this patch, but like I've said in previous videos, you can pair this set with pretty much anything, and it opens up all kinds of interesting hybrid builds. So of course we have Pelinals here to copy the weapon damage over into our spell damage, allowing us to effectively deal both magic and physical damage on the hybrid. The next set that we're running is Morag Tong, and we're running this set on our dual wield bar. Now, Morag Tong is actually a personal favorite hybrid set of mine from the past, because back in the day, before we could do 2 pieces on the two-handed weapons, I would run 5 Pelinals, 2 Slimecraw, and 4 Morag Tong on a hybrid, and that was my pretty standard hybrid build that we did back then. Of course, we didn't have the infused jewelry, and we didn't have the extra slot, so hybrids now, as you can imagine, are much better than they used to be. But Morag Tong was a great set for a hybrid back in the past, so I'm glad to bring it back onto the hybrid in the Summerset patch. This is a great set. We get the weapon damage, the max stam, and the weapon damage. The weapon damage is so important because that's going to copy over into our spell damage. And then on the 5-piece, when you deal direct damage, you cause an enemy to take 10% more damage from all poison damage abilities for 5 seconds. Now, as you guys know, a Stamina Dragonknight has a ton of poison damage over time abilities that they have access to. So this is a really, really great set for a Stamina Dragonknight. And due to the fact that this set pairs really well with Pelinals, we can take this and just move it right onto the hybrid build and throw a heavy dot build on the Stam DK using the whip. I know that everybody loves to use the whip, so that was kind of the idea here, was to put a lot of powerful dots on here and then have a viable whip as well. So there you can see that's how we did it. The Morag Tong is going to proc like crazy when we're on our front bar, and the amount of damage that the dots do are really intense on the DK, and this is just going to push them further. Now, the other set that we're running on the back bar is the Master's Bow that I had mentioned earlier. This is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, the poison injection that we do with it is going to buff up our outgoing damage against the target by 300 weapon damage, translating over into spell damage as well. And then secondly, this is our infused ranged weapon, so it's going to give us another buff to our weapon and spell damage whenever we do a light attack with it, and that is on a very short cooldown, so we could have it potentially up almost 100% of the time. So the Master Bow is going to be a very important weapon for this particular hybrid spec. And now finally the last set that we have is the Slimecraw, and Slimecraw was picked because we get Minor Berserk from it, 8% increased damage. This is going to be towards our Magicka and our Stam, our stamina damage, so this just helps both of our outgoing damages. Absolutely fantastic. And DK does not natively get access to Minor Berserk unless they wield a Restoration Staff, so that's why we have gone with Slimecraw as the Helm and Shoulder set. Slimecraw is also a really awesome hybrid set because the one piece is weapon and spell critical, so that is, you know, hybrids aren't super crit focused, but it is nice to get both stats out of it on the one piece, as well as that Minor Berserk. For the traits on the gear, guys, you want to go 4 well-fitted and 3 impenetrable. This is going to give you the bulky crit resist you need, as well as the well-fitted that you need to sprint and roll as often as you want to. On the gear, on the jewelry, sorry, we've gone with full infused. This is really important for the hybrid build because we're putting weapon damage enchants on here. That's going to get translated over into spell damage enchants, so having the infused jewelry is what allows us to really stack the weapon damage on Pelinals really high and get a huge payout for it. So infused is very important for the Pelinals build. The trait on our swords are both Nirnhoned. Now, ideally, you can do both Nirnhoned. It's going to be more expensive to go this way, but you get the higher outgoing damage numbers. You could alternatively go for a precise backhand sword if you want. It's only important that you really have the main sword Nirnhoned. Nirnhoning the backhand sword gives you about 50 more weapon and spell damage on base amount, so it's not like a massive amount. The 3% crit that it gives you is totally justifiable against that weapon and spell damage. And then for the enchants on the gear, we have of course gone with the Tri-Stat Hacky Joe Glyphs. Very important for a hybrid build. This is going to give us max health, magicka, and stamina, and we sorely need all of the max stat that we can get on this spec. And then for the dual wield bar, I'm actually running damage, health, poisons. And the reason we've got the poisons here is because, of course, we are running Morag Tong as well. Morag Tong is going to increase the amount of damage that these poisons do too. So it's just all playing into that outgoing poison damage that we have on this hybrid spec to really, really just wear people down with all the dots. Alright guys, let's take a look at the skill set that we're running. So we are running dual wield bow, as you saw, which is not necessarily what you'd expect a hybrid to run, but it was the weapon set that I felt would be best for this. I think the only really important weapon set to run for this particular spec is to run bow on the back bar, so you can use the master bow, and then run whatever you want for weapons on the front bar. I just chose dual wield because, well, I love dual wield plus the flame lash. It looks so cool. It looks so cool, so that's why I've gone with dual wield. Anyway, let's take a look at the abilities that we're using. And last but not least, I did want to mention that this is a hybrid build, so it is subjective what you want to run here, guys. You don't have to run the same abilities as me. This is just what I have chosen, so feel free to pick what you want, though. So we take a look at Flame Lash, and this is the first ability that we have. This is going to be your primary stun. This is going to be your primary kind of spammable damage ability that you use on this build as well. And the reason this is your primary stun is because we have real easy access to off balance on this build. Through our roll dodge, we're going to have an easy time setting lots of opponents off balance, and a quick Flame Lash or a partially charged heavy attack is going to stun them. So that's actually how we're going to be doing all the stuns on this spec, with our Flame Lash or with our heavy attacks. And there you go. Flame Lash also does quite a bit of damage. It is a great damage dealing ability. We have almost an 11k tooltip on this hybrid for it. And keep in mind that this is a very kind of split hybrid between burst and damage over time. So this is a great tooltip for the other skills that we're running with it. So let's take a look at the next ability. We have Empowering Chains. This is going to be our primary gap closer. It is also access to Major Expedition. We get that from our bow bar as well. So this is a DK build that sports quite a lot of Major Expedition. It's a little strange for a DK to sport a lot of that, but it is nice to have it. This is also a really nice gap closer because you can roll dodge while you use it. So the big advantage of something like Empowering Chain is that if an enemy is using a ranged attack on you and you throw the Empowering Chain as you roll backwards, so you cancel your Empowering Chain with a roll dodge, you will not only gap close into them, you will also dodge their attack and set them off balance, so that when you follow up the gap closer, you can hit them with the Flame Lash. So that's kind of a trolly little combo that I've been enjoying with the Empowering Chains Flame Lash on the hybrid build, just because it synergizes so well with the melee Dragonknight kind of gameplay. So I hope you guys enjoy using this. It does give you the empower to your light attack as well, which is just going to up that outgoing damage. But the real thing that I think this gap closer has over other gap closers is the ability for you to roll while you use it. The next ability that we have is Venomous Claw. Now this is going to be one of our most powerful damage over time abilities on this build. It's going to deal huge amounts of dot damage. I mean, look at this brutal tooltip on it. A 16k tooltip, 5k upfront damage. It only costs 1k stamina, and as the dot lasts on them, it'll deal 12 more damage every 2 seconds. Yeah, this is going to be one of the most deadly dots we have on this build. Morag Tong is going to push this tooltip another 10% higher. This is going to hurt. This is really going to hurt your target and deal a ton of damage to them. Yeah. The next ability we have is Spiked Armor. Now, Spiked Armor was chosen because I actually didn't morph it. That's really funny. Spiked Armor was chosen for the armor buff that we get from it. And the morph that you want to go for on this particular one is the damage over time morph. The one that sprays the spray of spikes around you. Volatile Armor. Here we go. And that will deal 10k magic damage over 10 seconds. So now we actually have an AoE dot on our front bar too. That's going to deal 10k magic damage over 10 seconds. This has a huge radius. It's a 10-meter radius, so you'll have a lot of range with it. And this is an effective stealth detect as well. You can pull people out of stealth with it. So it's really cool to take this armor buff and actually turn it into an effective damage over time ability on the hybrid Dragonknight, going along with just how much synergy we have on this build with the crazy amount of dots. The next ability that we have is Coagulating Blood, and this, of course, is your primary heal. Burst heal for the build. Coagulating Blood is going to be your Magicka dump heal, and it is really good on the hybrid. You'll see in the duels, it's a great heal. You can easily pop 2 coags, and it should get you to full health. Fantastic, fantastic Dragonknight heal. You shouldn't be popping them back to back, though. You do want to use Coagulating Blood in combination with Vigor, which is the other heal we're running on this build. For the ultimate, guys, you want to go with Flawless Dawnbreaker. Flawless Dawnbreaker is the ultimate that you need to use on the hybrid Dragonknight. You can go with Dawnbreaker of Smiting if you want. You'll cut 5% weapon spell damage from your build if you do, but then you get the big burst AoE ultimate. If you're going to go that route, you may as well just throw Leap on your bar and just say screw it to Flawless altogether. That being said, I highly recommend that you run Flawless on your front bar, and it's just because of that big amount of weapon spell damage it's going to give your build. Looking at the tooltip on Flawless, it's actually not that bad. I mean, we got a 13k tooltip on it, so we're hitting pretty darn hard with the Flawless as is. But we do not want to use this ultimate too terribly much. This is going to be your burst ult of choice, but the ult that you really want to use is your Corrosive Armor on the back bar if you have the ultimate for it. So moving on to the back bar, guys, we have got Poison Injection as our first ability. Poison Injection is going to be very important for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's a great damage over time ability that will deal lots of bonus damage as your opponent's health begins to drop. And number 2, this is how we're going to proc our Master Bow bonus damage as well. So the Poison Injection, and then swap to the main bar, deal a little bit of direct damage with either your Gap Closer or Light Attack or whatever. And look at that, you are dealing 300 bonus weapon damage plus 10% on the Morag Tong. So tons of bonus damage coming out of that combination there, and Poison Injection is so integral to that. The next ability that we have is Noxious Breath. This is a fantastic ability. I went with the Noxious Breath morph because it gives Major Fracture, which will reduce the opponent's physical and spell resist. Now, this is the one skill where it's honestly up to you if you want to choose the Magicka or Stamina morph of it. The Noxious Breath is nice because of that physical and spell resist debuff, but the other morph of it will increase the amount of damage that your whip will do. So what you're really choosing on this is, do you want to deal more fire damage or do you want to deal more poison damage and physical damage? So ideally you have more poison and physical damage coming out of this build, so I think Noxious Breath is the more obvious choice. That being said, the other morph that gives you the fire damage bonus is really nice because Lash is your burst skill, and it is nice to have that bonus damage on your burst skill too, so you can hit a little bit harder, getting you that kill, whereas you maybe wouldn't have gotten it before. So that one's kind of up to you guys, just whatever you want to use here. I liked Noxious, but I didn't play tons on this build, so play around with it, guys. The next skill we have is Resolving Vigor, and this is going to be our primary stamina dump heal, and it's actually a pretty decent heal. We do have our Draconic Power passives playing into the the Vigor heal as well. So if we look on our main bar, the Vigor tooltip is actually coming in at 15k on this build. So that's a very respectable tooltip, I think, especially when you pair it next to the coagulating tooltip as well. So we got the 8.5 coag, 15k Vigor, lots of healing power coming from both of our pools on this build. So there you see it right there. The next ability we have is Igneous Weapons, and this is going to be a very important buff skill for the build because this is going to give us access to Major Brutality as well as Minor Brutality. This is the only Draconic or Earthen Heart ability, that we're running, and casting an Earthen Heart ability gives you Minor Brutality for 20 seconds as well as whatever that Earthen Heart ability does. So that's just part of the Earthen Heart passives. So giving us both Major and Minor Brutality is going to give us a 25% bonus to our weapon and spell damage, which is absolutely fantastic for the hybrid spec. It allows us to rival weapon and spell damage values that a Templar would look at getting. So there you go. Works really well for this build. Works really well. And then finally, guys, the last ability on the bar is still a very important and fantastic ability for the DK, Reflective Plate. Flex your scales, reflecting up to 4 projectiles for 6 seconds. On activation, you remove all snare effects. That is really good. This is your snare removal. Now, that may not seem like it is as good as you'd want it to be, but something that I want to tell you guys a little bit about snare removal is that if I'm standing in someone's caltrops, let's say this whole bridge is covered in caltrops, and the only place that's safe is the grass here. If I'm standing in caltrops, I'll be moving at normal snare speed. When I cast my wings, it removes all snares from me, but on top of it, it actually gives me around 1 second of immunity to all snares after I cast the wings. So it takes about 1 second for any new snares from ground-based effects to reapply. So what this wing effect essentially does is if I get locked down in a snare trap right here, I can do wings into roll dodge and still maintain a bit of sprint speed, and I'll make it even probably behind this tree before the snare reapplies itself, assuming I'm still standing in the snare. If I get out of the snare, it won't reapply itself. So the removal of snares is a really great ability, but something that it doesn't tell you is that when you remove the snares, you actually get a little bit of snare immunity for about a second, and you can take advantage of that big time in PvP to move you out of the danger location you're stuck in. So this was great because this is a change that they did in the Summerset patch, and I think DK really needed it. I like this change to wings. Finally, DK gets that snare removal that it needs. And then the ultimate we have on the bow bar is Corrosive Armor, guys, and you know why we picked Corrosive Armor. While active, your attacks ignore all physical resistance, so that's a great part of it. And that plays into the Noxious Breath as well, so maybe you do want to go with the Fire Morph if you're going to have good corrosive uptime. But Corrosive is also going to cap incoming damage at 3% of your max health and just AoE bleed everyone around you with the poison damage. Sorry, not bleed, but poison everyone around you with the dot. So we have a really, really strong ultimate here. This is essentially 11 seconds of invincibility on your Dragonknight. 1 player's not going to kill you if you have this ult up. 2 players are not going to kill you. 5+ is what it's going to take to actually kill you if you have this ult up. And even then, capped at 3% of your max health, I mean, they're just not going to do a lot of damage. So there you can see Corrosive Armor is going to be fantastic for this build, giving it crazy amounts of survivability when we really need it, as well as having that physical resistance penetration. That's going to come in real handy in killing opponents, especially tankier targets who have a lot of resistances. The dots are really going to wear them down once you put the Corrosive Armor up on them. Now, this ultimate here is the one that I chose. Ideally, you can choose any ultimate you want. You can even go for the bow ult if you want. That being said, it is not a poison ult if you go for the ballista, so you can't get the Morag Tong bonus on your bow ult, which is a little sad. But it's totally subjective and up to the user. I think Corrosive is the best bet, though, for PvP. Okay, guys, let's take a look at the champion points on this spec to finish up the build. Starting in the tower tree, we've got 26 Warlord, 11 Sprinter, and 5 in Bashing Focus. Warlord's so important for breaking free because you need to break free. Sprinting important because we're going to sprint, and Bashing is going to happen in PvP too. And this is the spread you want because that's, I think, where you really need them the most. In the Lover tree, we've got 56 Mooncapped, 64 Arcanist, and 0 in Tenacity. Now, I didn't actually put anything in Tenacity because we're running both physical weapons. We don't have a magical weapon, so I didn't decide that Tenacity would be a good idea because we don't get hybrid sustain from it. Arcanist was focused more heavily on because I felt that due to the fact we're running physical weapons, we didn't want to run out of Magicka more than anything else, so I decided to focus on Arcanist in the sustain passive here. And I think this is the better bet because the Magicka is the one resource that if you run low on, you have to wait for your ultimate or a potion to get back. I put a bunch in Mooncalf too because we do need a lot of stamina recovery. It's definitely going to play into this build. In the Shadow tree, we've got 44 Tumbling, 44 Shadow Ward, even split between here. And the reason I didn't even split is because we're on a Dragonknight. Dragonknight actually gets a bit of a bonus to blocking that other classes don't. They can mitigate more damage blocking than other classes do. So that being said, I just put more into blocking. For that reason, DK just blocks better. So putting a few points here is going to be good. Blocking is very important for PvP, and we are in medium armor, so rolling is also going to be very important too. In the Apprentice tree, we have got 32 in Elemental Expert and 7 in Spell Erosion. Not a lot of points in this tree. The only passive we're really striving for is the 12% spell crit here. In the Atronach tree, we have a very heavy dump. 81 in Master at Arms, so a huge focus on Master at Arms on this spec, and that's simply because Master at Arms is really where your burst damage is going to come from, and this is the pool that's going to increase both your physical and magical burst damage. So this is our light and heavy attacks really playing into this, as well as our whip and our empowering chains. The physical weapon expert is of course picked as well because we have a lot to dump into physical, simply because we're not running a staff. If you choose to run a staff on this build, you definitely want to put some points into staff expert as well, but I would keep the focus on Master at Arms. I think it's well worth it for the hybrid spec. The important passive we get here is Tactician. This is going to give us access to that off balance that this build will need to stun people. If you don't have the Tactician passive, this build will not work, so you must get this passive for this build. In the Ritual tree, we have 32 in Mighty and 8 in Piercing, and then 51 in Thaumaturge. So the 32 Mighty, 8 in Piercing is just to reflect what we have on our Atronach side. So we're just reflecting that equally damage-wise, and then a big focus on Thaumaturge because we have so many damage over time abilities on this build. It's going to deal tons of dot damage as well as have great burst damage too. This is just an all-around high damage hybrid build. It's a pretty incredible spec, I think, for the DK. And yeah, Thaum's going to play into almost all of your dots, so almost all your attacks will be affected by this as well, so it'll be super great for your spec. And then, of course, a very important passive to get is the Exploiter passive. Not as important as just getting access to the off-balance, but once you get access to that, you want to get Exploiter for that 10% bonus damage against the off-balance enemies. That's just going to deal increase all your outgoing damage, including your dots and bursts, so great for the hybrid. In the Steed tree, we have got 61 Ironclad and 60 in Resistant. 61 Ironclad, of course, because a lot of incoming burst abilities are single target, and this is going to counter that. 60 Resistant because PvP is very much crits hurt, so you want to run Resistant so you don't get hurt by those big fat crits. And then finally, 10 Spell Shield and 10 Physical Resistance, and that's just to bulk up our spell and physical resistance. In the Lady tree, we've got 27 Hardy, 27 Elemental, and 28 Thick-Skinned. A very even spread here because we don't have access to a Purge, so we just want to make sure that all incoming forms of damage are being mitigated about equally on this spec. And then finally, in the Lord tree, we have got 27 in Quick Recovery. Not a huge focus on the Quick Recovery here. This build, you could dump more into Healing Power. That being said, DK gets awesome access to Healing Power passives, and the healing on this build is by no means bad. We saw that we have pretty great tooltips on our healing, so only dump more points in here if you really feel like you need more healing. Otherwise, I think this is honestly the best way to go. Alright guys, so of course we are going to include a bit of PvP footage because I did one build that I didn't include footage for, and everybody lost their shit. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. No one lost their shit, but I'm sorry that I didn't get to include footage for the last build, guys. I am trying to pump these builds out as fast as possible, and I move very quickly, so I don't actually spend a lot of time on one spec before I'm already on to the next one. That being said, I did go and do some duels on this spec, and I did get them on footage or on camera for you guys so you can see what it looks like in a one-on-one fight. And here you can see we are fighting another medium armor Stamina Templar. So we've got a very bursty Stamina Templar, I think, is essentially what we're dealing with here. And you can see that he's got a ton of healing power, a lot of sustain, and a lot of purge. So this is actually, like, I think a fairly difficult fight for my spec, simply because we're so dot heavy on the build, and you get to really just see how much pressure we can actually put into this guy, but not only that, but how well we can survive and heal ourselves. A lot of this build is playing that medium armor, just watching the opponent. You can see here I'm just watching what he's doing, making sure to keep my wings up when he pulls his bow out. Whenever I get a good dodge on his attacks, I'll follow it with the partial charged heavy or a whip to get that stun as often as I need, and then just cycle my dots and my buffs as needed. And there you see I get another awesome stun off on that. So the big strength of, I think, this build in kind of the dueling aspect is that you want to just play a strong counter game with it. Watch what your opponent does, dodge their incoming attack, and as you're kind of like waiting for that opportunity to dodge their attack, you just dot them up, start working away at their HP bar with the damage over time, and when the opportunity presents itself, you go in for that big stun. That being said, though, this guy played really well. We had, I think, 3 fights, and I only managed to win 1 of them, but I will include 2 of them here for you guys. That being said, though, I definitely didn't feel like I was weaker than him in this fight at all. I mean, he's playing a Stamina Templar, and I'm on the hybrid, and it feels like we're both playing PvP builds, and we're both fairly evenly matched in this. I mean, nobody's really seems to be having the edge here, and yeah, I think it's a good sign to see hybrids performing like this. But I think that a reason maybe why this build's so good at the dueling situation is because it is a damage over time based build, and dot builds in general just tend to be better for duels. There you can see he manages to get me with a really strong combo, and I pull just the wrong response move to it. What I should have done there was rolled away from it and in the opposite direction, but I rolled in the direction of his jab, so that was kind of my fault. We went down there. I think we could have kept the fight going had maybe I had a little bit more experience on this build. But anyway, we're going to include another fight for you guys as well with this Templar, and this was a very, very long fight I had with him. This was our best fight, I think, between the two of us. Simply because it just lasted forever. Both of us got a good feel for each other's builds and rotations, and a fight like this is really nice when you're trying to figure out a new build. Personally, I enjoy getting into these lengthy, drawn-out fights where the fight is actually like fairly even, and I think it's really important for learning a new build, especially because it gives you the opportunity to just feel out the build in all kind of combat situations, right? You get to feel out the build while you're on the defensive, on the offensive, and you of course get to, you know, watch and learn your opponent so you can help yourself do better on the build. But as you can see here, he is just playing an absolutely fantastic job with that purge. And he's doing a really great job just heavy countering the dots. And that's something that the Stamina Templar really needs to do, especially against a build like this where we have so many dots. The Templar is just going to be, having that purge is going to be integral to his survival. But as you can see here, we do manage to maintain a relatively offensive standpoint on this guy, and I think that's just because of the build matchup. I mean, we've got the build where, you know, we have to maintain a kind of offensive stand on this guy in order to keep the pressure on him, because if we just let him turn around and put the pressure on us and don't keep whittling at him with the dots, then we take those, as you can see, super mean Dawnbreaker combos. Yeah, how hard is he hitting with that? Oh my gosh, his Dawnbreaker is hitting like a truck. There you see he does a really good, he anticipates the Dawnbreaker after my stun, goes right into the block. Honestly, I want to give a big shout out to this guy because this was actually a treat to fight him, because not only did he fight really well, but he learned my build as we fought, and a lot of duelists I find don't learn your spec very well as you continue to fight them. But this guy really just started countering the spec well as we continue to duel, and yeah, I just actually wanted to give a big shout out to everyone who's been in my videos in the duels and stuff, because without you guys, I don't have anyone to test these builds on. I know the PTS is tough to find people to fight on, but it's so nice to just well, come to here, the spawn area, we had like 4 people that were doing some fights, so I was actually able to do some duels on the PTS, so that was pretty sweet. Something I did want to note about the build is that the Magicka sustain is actually pretty decent. That was something I was a little concerned with when I was putting it together because we didn't have a Magicka weapon. I was like, okay, well, how are we going to do on the Magicka sustain-wise? But as you can see here, like, just having the tripod and the ultimate, we actually have, like, quite huge pools of sustain. I would say this build, you're probably safe dropping the regen drink if you really want to put more damage on it. I mean, this is a fairly high damage hybrid spec. This is one of the higher damage specs that we've done and a higher regen spec. I think just in general, this is a really fantastic hybrid spec that has just a lot of synergy, and the synergy in it is just with all these dots. Unfortunately, in this fight, I am using the unmorphed armor, so I don't get that bonus armor dot on him as well. But, you know, that's what it is. It's what it is, right? So guys, that is all the footage that I have for this build. Not a lot, because we're on the PTS, and honestly, like, this was all that there was to fight. Just a few guys here, and this guy was by far the best fights that I took, and I managed to have a few fights with him, so I thought that I'd upload the ones that we did with him. Of course, he was a Stamina Templar too, and I thought that was a great upload for this build, because a Stamina Templar is going to be something that will naturally counter this build. So it was a good experience to have that that dual experience on this build, I think. Anyhow, guys, if you like this build and like what you saw, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. If you guys want to catch me live, I stream live on Twitch, and you guys can watch me put this stuff together live in person. And you guys can come talk to me, ask me questions, talk about your builds. I love chat and shop. So if you guys want to come by the stream, feel free to come by there. And finally, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They are a VPN for gamers. So if you guys get crap ping to your favorite game and you feel like you're tired of that and you maybe want some better ping, then maybe a VPN is the thing for you. It's a local Canadian company. It's free to try from the link in the description below. Everything I mentioned, of course, is in the links below. And yeah, that's it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed. Look at that nice burst on the kill. Have a fantastic night, everybody. Enjoy the hybrids, and I'll see you next time.